Well, as you know, this is the fourth in the series of Building the Temple of Light talks. And in these, we're delving deeper into the mystery and meaning of Francis Bacon's Great Instauration. And in this particular talk, we shall look at what Francis Bacon refers to as the formal and final causes, and see if we can really grasp the essence of what he means and how it might help us and all of humanity, and all nature as well, for we are not separate from nature, and neither is the divine wisdom, as Bacon pointed out. Wisdom is in nature. But we need to find this wisdom, get to understand it, and then practice it. And if we can do this, it will then inevitably bring about a harmony, a beauty, and a joy on earth for everyone, nature included. It will be a golden age or ages wherein the whole world will become a paradise. Now, many great illumined beings have prophesied that out of this Kali Yuga or Dark Age, we're going to go into a golden age if we can step correctly through this threshold that we're in, threshold of testing and judgment at the moment. But I always like to remember the story of the phoenix, which Bacon uses a lot. You know, the phoenix arises from its ashes, so it makes its pyre on which it can immolate itself, and then it, as it were, burns up and then resurrects, reborn in an even finer form than before. And hopefully this is going to be the story of us as humanity and all nature right now. It's certainly the end of a great age when such things can happen, but it's probably more than just one great age, and maybe a cycle of many great ages coming to the end of that. So it's pretty big times that we're in. And Bacon came, as many people of the time at his time said, he came as the one to prepare us for this, to help us get through this in the right way, in the best way possible. And so he left for us a great science or philosophy, or method to develop a science or philosophy by which we might do this. So this is what we're really looking at in this whole series, and everyone who's interested in Bacon is really delving into this, all in different ways, because there's so many different aspects to this. But for this talk, let's start by looking at Francis Bacon's pyramid of philosophy again, which is the pyramidal temple which will one day become a complete pyramid of knowledge. In other words, a pyramidal temple of light, and which indeed is already in the process of becoming so. Now, in his advancement of learning, Francis Bacon refers to 2 stages and 4 subdivisions of the pyramid of philosophy. The 2 stages are physics and metaphysics. The 4 stages are material, efficient, formal, and final. I'm going to share my screen now. So as Bacon says, for knowledges are as pyramids, whereof history is the basis. Serve natural philosophy, the basis is natural history. The stage next the basis is physique. The stage next the vertical point is metaphysique. As for the vertical point, the work that God maketh from the beginning to the end, the summary law of nature, we know not whether man's inquiry can attain unto it. Then he says, for as we divided natural philosophy in general into the inquiry of causes and productions of effects, so that part which concerneth the inquiry of causes, we do subdivide according to the received and sound division of causes. The one part, which is physics, inquireth and handleth the material and efficient causes, and the other, which is metaphysics, handleth the formal and final causes. Physics is concerned with material and efficient causes. So you could say that level 1 or subdivision 1 is the material causes, and subdivision 2 or physics is what's called the efficient causes. Then metaphysics is concerned with the formal and final causes. So again, 2 stages or subdivisions, the formal causes and the final causes. So this creates 4 levels of the pyramid. And this, very interestingly, is very similar or is representative of the 4 worlds of Hebraic, classical and Christian tradition. These 4 worlds are the physical or natural world, which we call the body, the material world. Then the psychological or moral world, that's the world of the natural soul. It's called the natural soul in the Bible. That's the psyche, our personality. So that's the efficient laws, the efficient causes. Then you've got the 3rd world, the celestial or spiritual world. And that's the world of the spiritual soul, and also what's called the spirit or angel. That's the world of forms, what Plato calls forms. Bacon calls it the formal causes. And then the final, highest world is the divine world, or archetypal world as it's called in tradition. And this is inhabited by what's called the Great Spirit. And the great spirits or archangels. So it's a universal spirit, the great spirit of all, and then subdivided into the great spirits called the archangels. And these are the final causes that Bacon wants us to look at. The word angel, I should add, means the thought or idea of God, the divine idea. Ang-el, the divine idea, the divine thoughts. They're the great archetypes. Now this also corresponds, in terms of trying to inquire into this, to what the Hebrew Kabbalists called paradise. And paradise is a word we get from the letters, Hebrew letters PRDS. And so the Kabbalists say that there are 4 levels of meaning enshrined in the Torah by which it can be understood. And these 4 levels are represented by the 4 letters PRDS. And that's often said in the Hebrew language is called pardes, which means orchard. And this orchard is paradise, what we call paradise. And these 4 levels correspond again to Bacon's pyramid, the levels of Bacon's pyramid. So the first lowest level is the letter P, Peshat, and that means simple. The simple inquiry, that's the literal or mundane level of looking at things. The outermost things. A lot of people only simply look at things outwardly and think that's it. They don't bother to look deeper. Well, the next level is the R, letter R, remez, and that means hint. And that's alluding to the allegorical aspect of the text, also called elusive or symbolic. And in terms of the human level, that's the moral, also the moral level. In the Bible, it's the level of the moral teaching. So you have allegories, which actually are to convey the morals that one should lead. Then the next level beneath that is symbolized by the letter D, and that's called derash, which means search, searching much more deeply. It also means inquire into, so it's interesting that Bacon calls all inquiries inquisitions, to inquire or make an inquisition into something. That means to search. And you could say that's the more scientific level, deeper level of things. And then the ultimate level, the final level, the top level, if you like, of the pyramid, represented by the letter S, and that's called Sod. It's not a swear word, it's a Hebrew word that means hidden. Hidden. And the Kabbalists call that the holy mystery and secret magic. And in terms of the tree of life, talking about the tree of life in Kabbalah, that they say Sod is the initiation into Chokmah, number 2 on the tree of life, which is the holy wisdom. In other words, that's where you discover the real wisdom in that top level. The divine archetypal world, the final causes, supreme causes. And then you have the summary, or summary means universal. You have the summary law, the universal law that Bacon gives, which is the cause of causes. And this is represented by what he calls the vertical point of the pyramid. That's the apex of the pyramid. And he refers to this as the work that God works from beginning to end. And he refers that, or says that is the same as Cupid or love. Love, God is love. Cupid is God. Cupid is the first manifestation of the unmanifest that we can actually call God, because the unmanifest has no name. So Cupid, or Eros, as the Greeks called it, is love. That is love manifest. God, who is love. And this comes in principally in the Orphic Dionysian teaching and the Christian teaching. Jesus is very much practicing the Dionysian or Orphic teachings. And he had to try to tell the Jews that actually original teachings that Abraham and Sarah brought from Mesopotamia with them were actually Dionysian, and that God is love. So Jesus had to pick out of the Torah, it says in the Ten Commandments, love God, but it doesn't tell you God is love. So Jesus has to pick out in the Torah, hidden away in various books, about how God is love and love your neighbor as yourself, because it's been missed, and it should be there supreme, supreme. And so that's what he brought out, and he taught his disciples that, because that's the ancient Dionysian Orphic teaching, the base fundamental teaching of all life, really. And then Bacon goes on to explain that this love is not dormant, it's actually, because it's manifest, it's love in action. It's God in action, love in action. And then he associates this with the natural motion of an atom. And this natural motion of the atom, and it's not the sort of atom that we normally call an atom. They refer to an atom as the invisible aspect, the unmanifest, if you like, the darkness, and that is through movement, it suddenly takes on form. So the atom is the unmanifest potential released into through motion, and then it takes on form and consciousness. And that natural motion is the creative force, the life force itself, and that is love in action. So to quote Bacon again, this is from his essay of Cupid and the Atom, that was printed in Wisdom of the Ancients. They say then that love was the most ancient of all the gods, the most ancient therefore of all things whatever, except chaos, which was said to have been coeval with him. And chaos is never distinguished by the ancients with divine honour or the name of a god. I'll stop there. Incidentally, you may not realise, but chaos is the old Greek word for the void darkness, the darkness that lay upon the face of the deep, the dark void, the unmanifest. That's what chaos literally means. Without form, formless. Chaos is formless. The original darkness or potential of everything. So that was coeval with this love, movement of love, moved within this chaos to create everything. So Bacon goes on, this love is introduced without any parent at all, only that some say he was an egg of night, and himself out of chaos begot all things, the gods included. This love I understand to be the appetite or instinct of primal matter, or to speak more plainly, the natural motion of the atom, which is indeed the original and unique force that constitutes and fashions all things out of matter. Now this is entirely without parent, that is, without cause, for the cause is, as it were, parent of the effect, and of this virtue there can be no cause in nature, God always excepted, that's the unmanifest, there being nothing before it, therefore no efficient, nor anything more original in nature, therefore neither kind nor form. Whatever it be, therefore, it is a thing positive and inexplicable. And even if it were possible to know the method and process of it, yet to know it by way of cause is not possible, it being, next to God, the cause of causes, itself without cause. Then he goes on to say, for the summary law of nature, that impulse of desire impressed by God upon the primary particles of matter, which makes them come together, and which by repetition and multiplication produces all the variety of nature, is a thing which mortal thought may glance at, but can hardly take in. That's worth thinking about very carefully. This is the sort of thing scientists are looking for all the time. But here it is, clearly stated about the summary law of nature. Clearly Bacon knows a heck of a lot about this. For the summary law of nature, that impulse of desire impressed by God, that's love, movement of love, that impulse of desire impressed by God upon the primary particles of matter, which makes them come together to create form, in other words, and which by repetition and multiplication produces all the variety of nature, is a thing which mortal thought may glance at, but can hardly take in. Then he goes, ends his whole statement about it. For beyond all doubt there is a single and summary law in which nature centres, and which is subject and subordinate to God, the same in fact which is meant by the words, the work which God worketh from the beginning to the end. That statement, the work which God worketh from beginning to the end, description of love, God's desire or will, the work which God worketh from beginning to the end. It's actually taken from the Bible, from Ecclesiastes, book 3, verse 11. And then he repeats something of this again in another one of his texts, which is what he wrote on the principles and origins according to the fables of Cupid and Coelum. For the summary law of being and nature, which penetrates and runs through the vicissitudes of things, the same which is described in the phrase, the work which God worketh from the beginning to the end, that is, the force implanted by God in these first particles, from the multiplication whereof all the variety of things proceeds and is made up, is a thing which the thoughts of man may offer at, but can hardly take in. Well, as you can see from this, Bacon has really tried to fathom out this great mystery of this summary law, this universal law, which scientists are still hunting for right now. And Bacon realised it's almost, well, he grasps a little bit of it, didn't he? But there's, we can hardly take it in. And everybody can express love. Most people have at some point in their life, and maybe they do it a lot. But so often it's just taken for granted. Oh, it's just love. It's just love. not thinking that actually love could be the greatest force, creative force in the whole universe, that everything arises out of that love. Everything depends on that love. It can create, it can destroy in order to recreate again. Make things better and better and better. More and more beautiful, more and more wonderful. But lots of people just think, oh, it's just love. Well, let's think very deeply about this. It's what Bacon's trying to get us to do, as other great teachers have too, like Jesus and Buddha and so on. So this creative force or will of God, because that is will, the will of God, God's will. We can manifest God's will as goodwill. Good is the divine love. Goodness is love. That this creative force or will of God is denoted in the Bible as the Spirit of God that bears the word of God. So this force carries the wisdom. And it's the work which God works from beginning to the end. It's love in action. It's called the spirit or breath in the Hebrew Bible. It translates literally as breath. But that breath carries the word, carries the wisdom, which can then be spoken in ourselves. It's spoken through the throat, in a language. But we can't do it without that breath. The breath carries that wisdom, that word, and then we can speak it. This is love in action, this wonderful breath that bears the word, the wisdom, this great spirit of life. Now, Bacon based virtually everything he did on the Holy Bible and his understanding of it, his very, very profound understanding of it, and but also compared it with other great religions and traditions as well that he was able to do at that time. But this whole work is actually based, if you like, on the first chapter of Genesis. And this part is particularly, after the first sentence, which starts it off in a big summary. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. In the full Hebrew interpretation of that, I think I've told you before, means not in the beginning, and that's been and gone. It means in the beginning of the beginning that is always beginning. In other words, the beginning without end. It's always going on. In the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. God is a translation of the Hebrew word Elohim. Elohim is plural. And literally it means Abba, Ama, father, mother, or if you like, male, female. And then it includes everything else within that. And so it's sometimes called the All, A-L. We say all, A-double-L, but it comes from the original Hebrew word that was spelt and pronounced A-L, Al. Later on it was turned to L, E-L. But originally it's the A, the mystical A, A-L, the All, L. And that is Elohim, male, female, plural. And that is why it says later on in Genesis that man, which means mind, man means mind, doesn't mean just the male. It means man is the mind who's created male, female in the likeness of Elohim. So of course, every single human soul, a mind is a soul, every single human soul is male, female. You might have a masculine body or a feminine body, you probably designed that when you're incarnating, or your parents designed it for you. But as a soul, you're a male, female, and then you have to act accordingly in the role you've been given to act on earth. There's huge amounts of confusion about that at the moment going on, certainly in England and in a few other countries, which is so sad. I mean, everybody's male, female in themselves. But if you're in the male body, you often calls upon you to act in a male way. rather than the female way, but I know I've got a very, very strong feminine aspect to me, which is a lot more intuitive than my masculine aspect. When I was younger, I was more masculine and I had to curtail that. That's a probably pain in the arse to other people. So I had to learn very hard to develop my more feminine nature and try to find that balance. We all trying to find the perfect balance or marriage of the two. Well, after that initial sentence of Genesis comes the next few lines, which in verses it's called verses 2 to number 5. But they're made up of certain lines or sentences. So I'm just going to, I show them here on screen for you, but I'm going to say them as well. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Now, the first 6 lines and 10 sentences summarize the whole life process, from the unmanifest source to the final manifest and knowing or illumined state of being. So it's all there in the first 6 lines. And the 7th line, the 11th sentence, is the final summarizing or transcendent knowledge that night, which is the darkness of unmanifest truth, precedes day. Night precedes day. Night is the original darkness of unmanifest truth, and day is the manifest light, the light of manifest truth, fully revealed and known. So just take that in a bit. I'm pausing so that you can take it in. You've got the whole of creation and its evolution and everything all summed up in these few verses, which make 10 sentences in all. And it gives you the life process. From the unmanifest source comes the initial impulse or inspiration that bears the word of wisdom. Then next comes the desire, which is the will, which manifests as the voice speaking the word and creating the vision. Then the next line, you've got the perception of this, the thinking of it and the understanding of it, understanding that the light is the manifest good, in other words, God. And God seeing this, so God says, it's good, it's me. I see me, this is me, it is right. And then it's put into action, it's manifested by being put into action. And that action leads to the final illumination, which is called revelation, the knowing, the real knowing, not just understanding, but real knowing because you've done it. And then comes the summary of all that in the supreme knowledge of the whole thing has worked. So can you follow that all right? The Spirit of God moving upon the face of the waters, that's the impulse or inspiration that bears the word of wisdom, that gets everything going, everything moving. It's the movement, which in our life process is our desire, our will, what we want. Then comes our thinking. So here you have God saw the light, so you're seeing the vision. And then you try to understand it, and you decide, oh yes, it's good. It's a good vision, good idea. Yeah. But now I have to put it into action. And then you put it into action. And God does this by dividing the light from the darkness. That's an action. Dividing the light from the darkness, separating the darkness from the light, so that the two become properly manifest. Well, the light becomes manifest from the darkness. You can see the difference. And that brings the real knowing, the real revelation, because you can see the difference so clearly between what is manifest and what is not manifest. You can see light as distinct from darkness. That's revelation. And then finally comes the supreme knowledge. And the evening and the morning with the first day, that supreme knowledge is summarizing the two together and say, oh yes, the darkness which is night came first, and the day which is light came second. So I just thought I'd point that out to you, because there's no doubt Bacon knew it very, very, very clearly. And I was helped to really discover this, because I'm kind of philosopher myself. I've always pondered on these things and so on. So both from my own experience and watching others and so on like that, and myself, and then reading Bacon over and over and over again, I suddenly got, and the Bible of course, I suddenly got it. As well, I got it to this point. I'm sure there's far, far more to get to know. The other thing one should understand about Bacon's philosophy, he calls it a moral philosophy. So it isn't just any old philosophy. It's a moral philosophy. It's based on morals. He clearly refers to his philosophy as a moral philosophy, wherein love, the summary law, and all types, varieties, and aspects of love, which are the formal and final causes, constitute the basis of all true life, which, he says, we should strive to understand and know. So he says these things about truth and about goodness. Truth, which only doth judge itself, teacheth that the inquiry of truth, which is the love-making or wooing of it, the knowledge of truth, which is the presence of it, and the belief of truth, which is the enjoying of it, is the sovereign good of human nature. And think about this. This truth is love. And doesn't everybody want love? You want to be loved? Don't we enjoy when we're in the presence of somebody who loves us and we love them? Isn't it enjoy it? But we have to woo it, don't we? We have to woo each other. And we would do the same for a gardener. You would woo nature. You would love the plants, and the plants would love you back, and so on like that. It's a whole love making. And then you can enjoy it, and that presence of it gives you that knowledge, the knowledge of it. And then that's your faith, that's your belief, that's your faith. You just know it's right, you just know it's true. The belief of truth, and you go forward in life like that, and that's your fundamental faith, the foundation of everything, foundation of your life and all life. And this is the sovereign good of all human nature. If only everybody could get that and could practice that. But of course we're challenged all the time, because we're trying to, I take the challenges as it's trying to get us to do even better. Bring out the best in us. And then Bacon goes on talking about goodness, which is about the same thing really. He says, I take goodness in this sense, the effecting of the weal of men. Weal means the health, or making people well, healthy and good. Perhaps the best translation, will is good, affecting of the good of men. And by men he means male, female, mankind, male, female. I take goodness in this sense, the affecting of the weal of men, which is what the Grecians call philanthropia. And the word humanity, as it is used, is a little too light to express it. Goodness I call the habit, and goodness of nature the inclination. This, of all virtues and dignities of the mind, is the greatest, being the character of the deity. And without it, man is a busy, mischievous, wretched thing, no better than a kind of vermin. Wow, it'd be difficult for any of us to say that ourselves out publicly, but you can quote it from Bacon. So that's what he thinks of people who are not acting in a good way. Goodness answers to the theological virtue charity and admits no excess but error. The desire of power in excess caused the angels to fall. The desire of knowledge in excess caused man to fall. But in charity there is no excess, neither can angel or man come in danger by it. In other words, everything we do should be charitable or philanthropic. That's how we should behave and how we should act. And we should note that Bacon understands that the word God means good in this. And it is one of the derivations of the word God. It's from the word good. And this is in the sense of the all good, whose character or nature is goodness. So in other words, as Bacon says, good morals are of primary concern in Bacon's science, and all laws that are discovered should be understood and practiced in this way, philanthropically, for the good of all, as this is the intended purpose of all the laws of the universe. Okay, what are all these other laws? Well, he goes into the science that one can develop about these metaphysical laws, and he refers to mathematics as a branch of metaphysics, by means of which we might comprehend the formal and final causes. So to quote him again, nevertheless there remaineth yet another part of natural philosophy, which is commonly made a principal part, and holdeth rank with physics and physics special, and metaphysics, which is mathematics. But I think it more agreeable to the nature of things and to the light of order to place it as a branch of metaphysics. Mathematics is made up of both geometry and number. Some people think mathematics is just number, but it's not. It's geometry as well, and in fact you can't separate the two of them. And this was known originally as cipher. Cipher is mathematics, which is geometry and number, not just number, but geometry and number. Two go together. It's really quite fundamental to understand. I mean, I trained as an architect and I got to know this from an early age, but a lot of people aren't trained in these things anymore. And geometry, well, I know that Freemasonry originally was sometimes said to be dedicated to geometry. It is the all-embracing architecture of the universe. And geometry gives you, in terms of how it forms itself, it gives you proportions which are numerical. You can see them as in terms of numbers then. And so it all goes together like that. So if you get the perfect proportions, perfect geometry gives you the perfect proportions which you can express numerically. This is cipher, good cipher, harmony. I was so upset, as an architect. I found the modern training as an architect, they didn't bother with geometry and proportion anymore, so I had to study that on my own and see what the ancient architects did. I think still many schools of architecture, they still don't teach the importance of geometry and proportion and so on, because it affects consciousness. Space affects us, and the proportions and the design of that space affects how we think, affects our behavior. It's so fundamental. It's so, I think, so blooming obvious. It seems to be missed. Anyway, this is all part of cipher, and Bacon actually uses cipher a lot. And in fact, this comprises a major part of his science of metaphysics. So as I said, the English word cipher in its original meaning refers to mathematics, which comprises both number and geometry, and these two are inseparable, even though most people today believe that cipher simply means number. But the word cipher is also related to the Hebrew word sephira, meaning ciphers or cipher, in the sense of a divine emanation or attribute, as used in the Hebrew Kabbalah. Kabbalah means the received wisdom. Sephira means cipher. Most people think that's just a number, but it's not. It's geometry as well. It's mathematics. And Sephiroth is plural. Sephira is singular. Sephiroth is plural. Now, most people know about Kabbalah through what's called the Tree of Life. And this has on it the 10 Sephiroth, as they're called. The 10 Sephiroth refer to the 10 emanations of the Tree of Life, each represented by a number and a name and a geometric form of some kind. And these 10 Sephiroth represent the 10 principal attributes of divinity and are the emanations of divine, creative life force or consciousness through which the unmanifest divinity, called in Hebrew Ein Sof, which means the infinite and eternal void of darkness, is made manifest and revealed. I'm speaking here teachings from the Kabbalah. So the 10 Sephiroth represent these 10 principal attributes of divinity, and these are emanations of divine creative life force, each with its consciousness, through which the unmanifest divinity, which is the infinite and eternal void of darkness, is made manifest and revealed. And Kabbalists show this tree of life as a mathematical diagram. They call it a tree for various reasons, allegorical reasons. But it's a mathematical diagram based on what's understood about these laws of life. And it comprises both number and geometry. So it portrays the 4 interpenetrating worlds or circles of infinity, wherein the 3 worlds that are called the worlds of creation, formation and fact are derived from the initial world of emanation. So you'll see in this diagram I've shown these 4 circles of or world. There's the dark one, is the black one is the first circle or world of emanation. Then you go to the blue one, the world of creation, then the purple one, the world of formation, and the red one, the world of action. And on the diagram they're actually shown closer together as the same size circle from the original circle, descending as it were, down an axis like that. So these worlds are said to be called forth, created, formed and made, as is every single human soul. We're all called forth, created, formed and made. So we're made up, we comprise all these 4 worlds. And they also describe the means by which we come into manifestation. As Isaiah chapter 9 verse 7 says, "Even everyone that is called by my name, For I have created him for my glory, I have formed him, yea, I have made him. As I said before, in each of these quotes where it refers to him or he or man, it's referring to male, female. So the English really isn't quite up to scratch in this, but it's what was intended originally. So from the one world come the three worlds, and each world is itself a trinity. Hence the saying that God is an indivisible trinity in unity, 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. And this translates numerically as 1 plus 3 times 3, or 1 plus 9, which is 10. Thus it is said in the Sefer Yetzirah that there are 10 Sephiroth of nothingness, 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. Then in total, if you add it all up in a numerical way, there are 4 circles, 22 lines, which are called paths, and 10 points. And those 10 points are what are referred to as the Sephiroth, or ciphers. So 3 circles emerge from one circle, 3 centers from one center, and 3 times 3 Sephiroth, or 9 Sephiroth, from one Sephirah. Now in this Darth knowledge actually starts off in this kind of invisible point, but falls to become number 10. And then it is raised, and this is the process of evolution, then it is raised to become true knowledge, which is the full and final manifestation of number 1. So first of all, there's ignorance or innocence. And then it has to, as it were, that consciousness has to fall into outermost matter in the world of action, and then gradually learn what life is about and manifest that life so that you really know it, and then you climb the tree to get back to that point there. And this point is on the crown of the third world, the world of formation, and it's the center of the second world of creation. And these are deep things to ponder on. Sometimes number 10 is called the Holy Grail, or the Grail. It starts off as the Grail. It only becomes holy when it reaches number 6. And that represents the heart. And then at the Holy Grail, it's the heart filled with love, and then it can be raised up to the crown, or towards the crown, to receive the full divine blessing. And this is still acted out in the ritual of Holy Communion or Mass by the Roman Catholic Church. Now the Kabbalists regarded cipher or mathematics as importantly as did Pythagoras, who considered that reality is essentially mathematical in nature, and that there was a system of principles existing behind numbers and their related geometry. And this is clearly what Bacon thought too, as also did John Dee, who is intimately associated with Francis Bacon and was probably one of the major teachers of Bacon in this respect. And there is, for instance, a symbolic picture depicting John Dee passing on the lamp of tradition to Francis Bacon. And this was published by Jacob Katz in one of his books of emblems. It's called The Lamp of Tradition, or Lampada Trado in Dutch, in a book called, to give it an English name, Christian Thoughts. And it was eventually, the whole of that book was published in the complete works, Old and New, of Jacob Katz, published by Schipper in Amsterdam in 1655. So this is where this emblem is taken from. But Dee is recognizable by his gown and his hood that covers his ears. And of course his long beard and other features too. Anyone who's learnt about John Dee will immediately recognize him in that picture. And he's handing on the lamp of tradition to this figure. Now Bacon, this figure represents Bacon, and he's identified very much by the roses on his feet, just as like the statue of him that was put up after his death in St. Michael's Church, St. Albans, shows that roses on his feet and so on. And also there are other emblems of Bacon showing these roses. It has a particular meaning, which I'll go into another day. So anyway, it identifies Bacon in that way. And also it refers to the mysteries. And of course, that's what the lamp of tradition is. It's referring to the mysteries. And this is confirmed by Bacon's rose-embellished feet being square to each other. Do you see? That is square to that foot. They're at right angles to each other. And moreover, the right foot is pointing forwards like that. That's another feature of the mysteries, which they still teach in Freemasonry, I believe. Now, the moon in the night sky is also indicative of the mysteries and of Kabbalah. And Bacon and the Rosy Cross Brethren were known as the men in the moon. The moon itself in Kabbalah symbolizes the mind that reflects the light of wisdom. And the wisdom itself is symbolized by the sun. So it's often shown on pictures of the Tree of Life, and also you find it in what are called the pillars of Solomon or pillars of Hercules and so on. There's the sun pillar, which is the wisdom pillar, and the moon pillar, which is the intelligence or mind pillar. And the lamp is being passed on an as yet empty grave. This grave can indicate either the death of Dee or the psychological death of him as Grand Master of the Mysteries. In other words, he's surrendering the lamp of tradition and its responsibility to Francis Bacon. So Dee, one can find out historically that Dee was almost certainly the Grand Master of the first group in England that set themselves up and gave themselves the name of the Society of the Golden Rosy Cross. So he was the Grand Master of that. And then at a certain time in his life, he passed on that Grand Mastership to Francis Bacon. Now this might have been on Dee's own death, which is round about end of 1608 or beginning of 1609, even earlier on as a psychological death. I'm still not absolutely sure, but I at the moment all things point to when the Shakespeare things took off in 1592. That's the moment, the time when Francis Bacon was made the Grand Master of the Society of the Golden and Rosy Cross, the Rosicrucian Society. Well, besides this emblem, there are also ciphers encrypted in various texts that say exactly the same thing. And also which describe mathematically some of the great laws of the universe. And we can thank somebody in particular for really discovering these in a big way. And this is Alan Green. So if you haven't already been to his website or been watching what he's discovering, I do recommend him going there. His website is called tobeornottobe.org. tobeornottobe.org. And he's made some wonderful discoveries. And the first one to look at is the title page of the sonnets, and the geometry and number that he's found there. It gives some of the great laws of the universe. And some of those laws were not discovered until after the time of Dee and Bacon. And one was only discovered very recently. And there's still a couple to be discovered. It's rather interesting. Scientists still have to discover another 2 laws which are shown in these sonnets. But as we've met other people, they say they've got the science for us to cope with the energy problem of the world and things like that, but they can't be given out yet until we've learnt morality. We have to learn how to use it in a good way, rather than use it to go and kill each other or hurt each other in some way, or to be greedy with it. So therefore, some of these scientific discoveries are being withheld until humanity is ready to use it in the right way. Now, like the Kabbalists, the Pythagoreans and their successors, the Platonists and Neoplatonists, such as Bacon and Dee, they considered that the source of all is represented mathematically by the number 1 and a point or dot within a circle, and this they named the monad. The source of all, as it manifests, as the first manifestation, is represented mathematically by this geometric figure and the number 1, and they called this the monad. Pythagoras believed the monad to be God, the good, the first primary and universal manifestation of the unmanifest divinity. And for this reason, philosophically, God is described as a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. And the center is the heart, God's heart. Moreover, the monad is the seed of a tree which grows a trunk and whose branches are the other numbers. And this is the tree of life, which becomes the tree of knowledge when we get to know each of its sephiroth or ciphers. Now, John Dee was, like Bacon, was deeply into all this, and he wrote a very famous book, which again has 4 levels in which one can understand it and read it, inquire into it. And he called this book the Monas Hieroglyphica. It's about his hieroglyphics of the monad. So the monad, as it develops itself, or has within itself, what Dee represented by his hieroglyph. And in the middle of this egg, that's the egg of night Bacon talks about, which is from one of the Orphic myths. The egg laid by night, out of which hatches Eros. So here, within this egg of night, you've got Eros, love, divine love. And it's represented like the symbol of the divine Mercury. So it has the sun symbol with a dot in the center. It has a crescent moon, and it has the cross. But in addition, Dee has added this symbol of Aries at the foot. Now the dot symbolizes, if you didn't already know, that symbolizes the whole process of life, which I've already described in those few verses of Genesis chapter 1. So the dot represents the inspiration, first impulse, if you like. And then that expands as the sun circle. And that's the good desire or goodwill. Good desire, goodwill. That's the sun. And then we think about it, and that's what the crescent moon represents, the mind that's thinking about the wisdom of the sun. So symbolically, the moon reflects the light of the sun. So we reflect on something when we're thinking about something, but it comes from the heart. What we're thinking about comes from the heart. And when we realize it's a good thought, we then put it into action, and the cross represents the action, putting good action and the different interpretations of the cross. But one of them is that every action involves all the 4 elements of life, and then you end up with the quintessence, which is light. So that's the standard divine Mercury figure, but the added to it is this sign of Aries. Now the Aries is at the feet, and the feet are ruled by Pisces, whereas Aries rules the head and Pisces rules the feet. And there is in tradition a saying that and it's in the Hebrew tradition, very much in the Hebrew tradition as well. And they talk about the Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God. And this is Aries that sacrificed in humility of action, love in action. You sacrifice yourself, your selfish ego is sacrificed in order to give your life for others in true service, in true charity or philanthropy, if you like, love in action. And it's said that Aries falls to the feet in sacrifice. That's the Lamb of God. And that's what is shown. And by Aries coming down to the feet, it sets in motion then the Kundalini energy, which is then symbolized by Scorpio, which is the opposite zodiac sign to Aries, to Taurus and Aries. It sets in motion the Kundalini, then rises up the spine as a fire. It's called the fire that shoots up. And in Hebrew tradition, they call that shh. Like in the West, it's the sushuma, but it's the shh sound. If you can hear it, rising up, it rises up like a fountain of life, but it's a fiery fountain to bring that illumination. But it will only do that when you've got love in action, and that's the sacrifice of the Lamb of God. You sacrifice or put your ideas into action, down on the ground. That's the real humility, is love in action, which is a kind of self-sacrificial thing. So that's what John Dee is showing here. It's brilliant. I think it's a brilliant hieroglyph. Well, the whole of, as far as I can find out, the whole of Bacon's Great Instauration is also designed in this way. But of course, the best known version of the Tree of Life is in the Hebraic and Christian Kabbalah. Now, Francis Bacon learnt Hebrew from an early age, and his mother, Lady Anne Bacon, née Cook, was a Hebrew scholar, and a well-known Hebrew scholar. Moreover, not only did Francis Bacon know Hebrew well, but he also knew the Kabbalah well, as his Great Instauration was designed on a deep understanding of its text and principles. And when in Paris, when he's still only a teenager, a 15-year-old, he was sent to Paris as an attaché of the English embassy in 1576. And as soon as he got to Paris, he had made for him, or he certainly had in his possession, a book comprising 2 Hebrew grammars, plus 2 additional pages in Hebrew added to it, all bound together and interleaved with sheets of English-made paper containing Bacon's handwriting. In other words, he got these Hebrew grammars, put sheets of blank paper in between them, and wrote on those blank pieces of paper. And this very rare book came into the possession of William Smedley, who described it in detail in his own book, The Mystery of Francis Bacon, which was published in 1910. But the unique book of Francis Bacon's, the Hebraicum Alphabetum, was printed and published in Paris a few months after his arrival there in September 1576, and was almost certainly made specially for him. The first grammar in the book is called Hebraicum Alphabetum, and the second grammar is called Sive Compendium Quintacunque Ratione Fieri Potuit Amplesimum. I'm not going to translate for you. That's Latin, of course, but the grammars are in Greek. And both grammars are interleaved with blank pages on which Bacon has written alterations and amplifications of the text, seemingly intended for a second edition to be made. In other words, he's correcting somebody else's translations or making new translations for new printing, and maybe teaching himself at the same time. Moreover, the second grammar contains the equivalent of Hebrew in Greek, Chaldaic, Syriac, and Arabic, which certainly shows that Bacon could speak all of this. It's kind of mind-boggling, really. Then after the 2 grammars, there are an additional 2 pages in Hebrew, complete with a Latin translation, which is titled in Latin, the Decem Praecepta Decalogi Exodus. This means the 10 commandments of the Decalogue of Exodus. And above this title is an AA headpiece. And this is the AA headpiece that I'm showing you here. And the book ends with the sentence, Ex Collegio Montis, Acuti, 20th December, 1576. So the date of publication was probably between January and March 1576, which would be 1577, according to modern dating. Now this AA headpiece is also it's the first time the AA signature had appeared in print like this, as a headpiece put together like this. It obviously, he came across it in France because the French mystery school there, which was set up by Francois I originally, Francois I at Fontainebleau had a special long gallery just for himself and his own carefully invited visitors only to go in. And the central feature of that was a huge painting with 2 AA at the foot of it in stucco, plaster. So obviously the signature was there as part of the mystery school. And actually I've traced it going right back in time, a long, long way. It's the signature of the real central mystery school, and it carries a huge amount of meaning. What Bacon's done is actually printed as a headpiece, and on it he's put the Gemini, the immortal Pollux and the mortal Castor. So he's associating them with the 2 A's, the double A hieroglyph, and in this way he's revealing a fundamental meaning of the double A. And these 2, the AA and the Gemini, were to become the primary cipher signatures and modus operandi of Shakespeare, and to be used for the purpose of identifying the authorship of Shakespeare, whilst also being a key to discovering and understanding, to some extent, the divine authorship of the universe. So as Bacon obviously intended, to search for the real author Shakespeare is simply a training in searching for the real author of the whole universe. And actually Bacon states that. He states he's going to give a practical experiment for us to take part in, for us to find the author of the universe. He states that in one of his books, but he doesn't spell out what this practical method is. We have to suddenly stumble across it, and then we find it's actually looking for the author of Shakespeare. So the Gemini is part of this secret. So it's therefore noteworthy that this book that Bacon had is made up of 2 Hebrew grammars, bound together like twins to make one book, and that the last 2 additional pages, not 1, not 3, but 2 additional pages added as a supplement, contain both Hebrew and Latin text, and that it is over this final 2-page twinned text that the AA headpiece is printed. So I imagine Bacon had this made for him, and he intended it to be discovered later on. I can only think that was his raison d'etre. Now, also while he was in Paris, at this young age, as a teenager, he invented the biliteral cipher. So he's obviously thinking very strongly about the Gemini and what it means. And out of this, he invented the biliteral cipher. He employs this Gemini principle. And he described it later in his Latin version of the Advancement of Learning, the De Dignitate et Augmentis Scientiarum. And the biliteral cipher is so called because it employs the use of two different font styles, labelled A or B. So there's illustration of them. So two different font styles, A or B. So there's an example, either an upright F or an italic F, for instance. And so you have to look carefully at either the written, how people write, or particularly in print, how it is in print. It's not easy, but anyway, it's a cipher that Bacon invented when he was young, and it was used by him, used by others. And it's very interesting that nowadays, what's developed from that is modern computer language. It's based on this biliteral cipher. But instead of using font styles, it uses something or nothing, just like the original something came out of nothing, you know, the original creation, something out of nothing. The original chaos is the nothing, and light comes out of it, something out of nothing. Well, all our computer language is based on this. Isn't it fantastic? Just think about that. So we're doing a Zoom by computer using this language, which is fundamental to life. And it's Bacon too. I mean, come on, something profound is going on here, I think. Well, Bacon's Kabbalistic ciphers, because he had many ciphers, and they're all based on Kabbalistic principles, and they're very similar to what was called the Latin Kabbalah, but based on the 24 letters of the Elizabethan alphabet rather than the 22 letters of the Latin Kabbalah. Latin Kabbalah is a Latin version of the Hebrew Kabbalah with its 22-letter alphabet. And there are three variations in Bacon's ciphers, which are known as the simple cipher, the reverse cipher, and the K cipher. K meaning the letter K, but also means key cipher. Well, the simple cipher, where A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, and so on, up to Z equals 24. This was first illustrated by Johannes Trithemius in his famous 3-volume work on cryptography and steganography called Steganographia, written around about 1499 and then published much later in 1606 in Frankfurt. And in this he computes the numerical values of the names of angels. The word, as I said, the word angel means divine idea, and it refers to the metaphysical forms or laws of the universe, of which the highest are the archangels. These are the formal causes and final causes, as Bacon calls them. So Johannes Trithemius, who was a monk in the Christian church, he was searching to understand angels in this way. He understood a lot, didn't he? Now this method was eventually published and illustrated on page 141 in Gustavus Solanus' great cipher manual, Cryptomenetices et Cryptographia, published in Germany in 1624. It's a book in which Francis Bacon was deeply involved. And we know this not only from certain ciphers and symbolism in this, but also from letters that Bacon was writing to the Duke Augustus. Gustavus Solanus is Duke Augustus, is pseudonym that he used. And his centre was in Lüneburg in Germany. So this Kabbalistic simple cipher was developed by Francis Bacon into what he called a fourfold structure, in which the 24-letter Elizabethan alphabet is repeated 4 times, like the 4 worlds, if you like, 4 times, so that the corresponding numbers continue to 96. That's to say 4 is 24. And each of the English letters and their number in the 4 sets relates to a Greek letter, a Latin word or words, and an element or celestial body. And Bacon left a record of this cipher for posterity, a fragment of which was eventually published by TT. Now TT stands for Thomas Tennyson, but also TT is a signature that goes hand in hand with the double A, double T. T is the tau, the end of the Hebrew alphabet, and is the aleph, the first letter of the alphabet. So it's the same in Latin, it would be alpha omega. So aleph tau, AATT, Thomas Tennyson, and it's used as a signature by various mystery schools, including Freemasonry. So Thomas Tennyson published this Baconiana in 1676, and in that he publishes a bit of this. And he puts in a chapter called The Lord Bacon's Psychological Remains. And here's a brief, this is just one page of it, there's several pages describing it. It's actually Bacon's own writing, but put into print. But Bacon doesn't give the whole lot, he just gives enough to enable other people to work out what the rest would be. And in this record, Bacon says that he has made the alphabet of nature as an index of inquisitions or inquiries to be made, compiled in an ascending order, and with the culminating inquisitions in his list concerned with being and not being. The final inquisition concerns being and not being. Being and not being is, of course, the greatest inquiry of all that should be made, if indeed it is at all possible. It's a question that's put in Hamlet's mouth, in the Shakespeare play of that name. To be or not to be, that is the question. Now, another thing I want to show you is this letter to Dr. A. Now, very often publications of Bacon's were done in such a way that the first printing of them contained extra pages or extra things in them that all the later printing of them did not. So obviously the very earliest printings were done just for a select few of people. So this is a letter to Dr. A by Francis Bacon, which was included in a special first edition of Resuscitatio, a collection of some of Bacon's various writings published by William Rawley, Bacon's secretary, in 1657. And it includes the AA signature in a most beautifully cryptic way. So you can see here Dr. A, and then the second A here. And then to read the letter in a certain way, again it has different levels. It's the outer level you can read it, but then there are deeper levels to look at it as well. Outwardly it's actually a letter to Dr. Rawley himself, but inwardly it's to AA, Dr. AA, so it's taking you deeper and deeper. Now this letter appears to be written soon after Bacon's impeachment in 1621, and it's signed at the end Francis St. Alban, which is his final title he was given. And it's Francis St. Alban. Many people put St. Albans with an S after it. It was not St. Albans. He was made the Viscount St. Alban. If it was named after the place, St. Albans, he would be the Viscount of St. Albans. That's not what he was made. He was made Viscount St. Alban. He's named after the saints. Very, very important to see that. And here this is how he signed himself, just to make it clear to everybody. Francis St. Alban. And there, inked in there, are two roses, like the two roses on his feet, but also like the AA. The AA produces the double rose, the omega, truth revealed, which is beauty. The rose represents beauty. Beauty is truth, truth is beauty, that's all you need to know. says one of our great poets. Now in this letter, although outwardly the letter is addressed to Dr. William Rawley, Bacon's chaplain as well as secretary, but cryptically, in the way this letter is written and addressed by Bacon and printed by Rawley, Bacon actually reveals that the AA is a synonym for time, otherwise known as Pan or Janus or Christ, the Alpha Omega. And this is symbolized in Revelation by the rider on the white horse. I am Alpha and Omega. In Eastern teachings, that time is Kalki, who also symbolizes the rider on the white horse. And Kalki is the 10th and final avatar of Vishnu, who comes at the end of the great cycle of time and human evolution. This is the same as the 10th and final appearance of Christ, usually referred to as the second coming. He appears symbolically as the rider on the white horse, whose name is faithful and true. Faithful and true. I hope you remember what I said about this. He appears as the Alpha Omega at the Omega moment of one great time cycle, which leads directly into and thereby becomes the Alpha moment of a new great time cycle. That's to say, the AA being appears at the AA moment in time. The Alpha is the Omega, but the Omega is the Alpha of the next cycle. So the Omega is Alpha, AA. Now time is called Chronos in Greek, or Saturnus, which is Saturn in Latin. And Saturn is the planetary symbol for Darth, which is knowledge on the Kabbalistic tree of life. So this is associated with full knowledge, full illumination. And time is the one that brings forth the truth and oversees a golden age. Saturn or time rules a golden age. Time brings forth the truth and oversees a golden age. So this is from Bacon's New Atlantis, when it was first published, the emblem on his title page. Time brings forth the hidden truth. And it would seem that time, the Alpha Omega, is now come at the end of this great age, or maybe set of several great ages, not only to reap, but also to thresh the harvest of the old and sow the seeds of the new great age. And it would seem that Francis Bacon knew this and prepared us for it and hoped and prayed it would be a golden age. So that's my end of this talk. And like him, I'm praying and hoping like mad that we can create a golden age. I hope you all are too. Okay, thank you very much.